So what I see is sports is on the frontier of how to handle this frontier of people who are trans. It's on the frontier of how to resolve that. And I'm making this up now. Imagine the future of sports does not distinguish sex. It distinguishes and sorts people by hormone ratios. I'm making this up, but imagine that if that were the case. That would be interesting.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Grab a seat because this one is a proper heavyweight clash of minds. Today we've got astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson sitting across from Piers Morgan, and what starts as a chat about science and reality turns into a full-on back and forth over fairness, biology, and how sports should handle one of the most debated questions out there. Piers comes in absolutely convinced the answer is simple, while Neil keeps insisting the real story is far more interesting than that. Two very different ways of thinking. One table, no script. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for the whole thing, because the way this conversation shifts in the back half is something you do not want to miss. And before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know exactly where in the world you're watching from right now. I genuinely love seeing how far this channel reaches. All right, enough from me. Let's get straight into it.
So I have been on this issue for a long time, and I am surprised, given your earlier statement just now about the importance that we have a fact-based society where science is based on reality and everything else. There is there not, I would put it to you, Neil, there is a cold, hard reality about this whole trans issue, which is that I'm sure like you, I absolutely want all trans people to have utter equality and fairness in the way that I do and you do. Absolutely. I've never said anything different. However, not to the point where it erodes women's rights to fairness and equality. And there is clearly a growing unfairness and inequality from the issue of people who are born biologically male, identifying as women and being allowed to compete against biological females, and then beginning increasingly to be quite dominant, to the extent where we saw people winning in the boxing in the Paris Olympics. We've just seen the Footballer of the Year, Women's Footballer of the Year in the UK, voted by the BBC, Barbara Banda from Zambia, also has been banned for sex-related issues in terms of not being allowed to compete in previous tournaments. And so on and so on. The UN just had a big report which said that 900 medals around the world in competitive sport have been deprived from female athletes because trans athletes had won. So I put it to you that you're a scientist. It is clearly an indisputable scientific fact that biological males have a superior power and stamina and lung power and all these other things to biological females, because if they didn't, we would never separate the sexes in sport. The Olympics would be gender neutral. And they're not for a reason. Women wouldn't win anything. So when I hear you try and justify it or say that there's a scientific, and maybe there's not, maybe I'm misquoting you here, but there's some kind of scientific reason why it's fine. I'm like, hang on, Neil, you're Mr. Reality Check. You're Mr. Cold Hard Fact. Surely you can see that this is wrong without it actually having to be transphobic to say that.
Well, so you have me here live on your show. We don't have to comment on other shows. So let's just have this conversation.
Yeah.
So I did my own study of the relative speed of men relative to women in Olympic sports, the world records, from the 100 meters to the 200 meters, the 400, right on up to the marathon. And what I noticed is in every event, on average, men were 10% faster than women, 10% faster. And in events that require strength, that percent was even higher. I forgot what my exact number, it might have been 50% stronger, okay? So across the board, that is the case. So there's no dispute there. That's
right.
Just objective truth. So now we have to ask, why do we watch sports at all, okay? And at Friday Night Lights, that's in the United States, that's high school football. Saturday, it's college football. Sunday, it's the NFL. Do you realize, of course, that the worst team ever in the NFL could wipe its ass with the best team ever in college. Why? Because every single player in the NFL was the best person in their college. And so there's no contest between these zones of athletic engagement. But we still like watching college. We don't watch college and say, you know, the Philadelphia Eagles could whip their ass, so let's not watch it. No, we like the equality of the contest and not knowing who would win. That's what makes sports fun. Okay, so if there's a wave of trans women who dominate the sport against other women, all those sports will become less interesting based on how we all watch sports. Even the Super Bowl here in the United States, if it's a blowout by halftime, nobody watches the second half.
Right.
We watch it for the equality of the contest.
This is the move that changes the entire conversation, and most people watching probably missed it. Because Piers walks in thinking he is holding the winning card. He keeps hammering that biological males have superior power and stamina and lung power, like that one fact ends the discussion. And here is what you have to understand. Neil never even denies it. He looks right at him and agrees that, on average, men run about 10% faster than women, and that the strength gap is even wider. So when Piers thinks he is cornering a scientist, the scientist just says, yeah, obviously, you are right about that part. That is not weakness. That is Neil refusing to play the game on Piers' terms. And then comes the part that blows my mind. Neil asks a question Piers clearly was not ready for. Why do we watch sports at all? Neil points out that we like the equality of the contest and not knowing who would win, because that is what makes sports fun. The raw fact that one body is stronger than another is not the thing that fills stadiums. The drama is. The uncertainty is. And that completely reframes what fairness even means here. Here is what people do not realize. Piers spends the whole opening treating biology as if it automatically settles policy. But biology describes what is. It does not tell you how to organize a competition, who gets a category, or what fairness should look like for everyone involved. Neil is the only one on that stage treating this like an actual problem to solve instead of a slogan to win. And from where I am sitting, that is the difference between someone who studies reality and someone who just wants the clip.
Okay, so
Sounds like you agree
all
with me
I'm
there.
saying is, like you said, wait, I'm almost done. So what I see is sports is on the frontier of how to handle this frontier of people who are trans. It's on the frontier of how to resolve that. And I'm making this up now. Imagine the future of sports does not distinguish sex. It distinguishes and sorts people by hormone ratios. I'm making this up, but imagine that if that were the case. That would be interesting. You get a hormone test, you're in this range, and then you compete against other people with the same range of hormones.
That's ridiculous.
That's
Neil, that is ridiculous.
No, it's not. I'll tell you why it's
You're
not
going to give
ridiculous.
every
Hold on.
single
I used to
person in
wrestle.
sport a hormone test.
Hold on. I used to wrestle. And wrestling, there are people who weigh, sorry, am I using pounds here, 125 pounds, right on up to 240 pounds. They don't wrestle each other. The entire sport separates people so that the contest is interesting.
Yeah.
And so the people of the same weight wrestle each other, and that is the contest.
But if Floyd Mayweather...
I don't know if
but
that's how it will land.
Hang on, Neil. If Floyd Mayweather fought a woman boxer, a female woman boxer, who was the same weight division, he would annihilate her. That's why we don't let it happen. And in fact, in the Paris Olympics, the winner of one of the women's boxing competitions, one of the
Piers,
females
that's not
who
what I was
took her
talking
on.
about.
But my point is that I just think that, if you don't mind me saying, I say this respectfully because I love you, but it just seems to me like you've dug yourself into a slight hole on this issue, and you're trying to get out of it. And now you're suggesting slightly madcap theories, whereas the science to me is obvious. You've already given the best argument I've heard for why we separate the sexes.
Hold on. You misquoted me in this very interview. What I said was the idea of creating categories within a sport, splitting them in the example I gave, which I just made it up, like hormone ratios, is not fundamentally weird compared to dividing wrestlers by weight.
No,
because
it is.
the only
It is.
reason why you
I'm
do
gonna
this
respond.
is to make an interesting contest.
No, Neil, you're wrong.
And so you said Floyd Mayweather fight. Hold on, hold on.
You're
you
wrong.
said Floyd Mayweather.
You're not
fighting
allowing for the superior male biology when it comes to lung capacity, stamina, to body mass, to muscle mass, all those things. If you just take one criteria of hormones, you're not allowing all that. I'll give an example. Caitlyn Jenner, who obviously hang on. I'm going to finish my point. Let me finish my point. Caitlyn Jenner was an Olympic male decathlon gold medal winner. Caitlyn is a big golf fan. And when she started playing golf after she transitioned, she was allowed to play off the women's tees, which are 50 yards further than the men's tees. And she quickly realized that she was still smashing it 300 yards down, and obviously was then beating all the women that she played. So she now plays back off the male tees because her biology is that of a man. And I feel that that was the most honest way to deal with it. I also feel that if you want to have a separate category, have a trans category. Or have trans women compete against men, which is their biology. Isn't that the scientific way to resolve this?
And here is where it gets good, because Neil throws out an idea, and Piers immediately panics. Neil floats this thought experiment. Imagine a future where sports does not sort people by sex at all, but instead sorts them by hormone ratios. He literally says he is making it up on the spot, just thinking out loud. And Piers jumps in, calling it ridiculous, twice, like the idea is beneath him. But stop. Why is that ridiculous? You have to understand something about how sports already work. We do not throw every athlete into one pile and let biology sort it out. Boxing, wrestling, weightlifting, judo, they all split competitors into weight classes. Nobody calls that mad. And here is a documented fact most people forget. Olympic boxing has used weight divisions since the early 1900s. Specifically so, a heavier fighter cannot just steamroll a lighter one. That is the sport admitting that a single body metric can decide a fight. So they built categories around it. So when Neil suggests categories based on a different metric, he is not inventing nonsense. He is describing the exact logic sports have leaned on for over a century. Then Piers reaches for his big example. He brings up Caitlyn Jenner and the story about golf and the different tees. And look, it is a vivid story, but one anecdote about one person on a golf course is not a policy. That is the part that gets me. Piers keeps saying Neil dug himself into a slight hole and is now suggesting slightly mad theories. But the person actually thinking on that stage is Neil. The person reaching for a soundbite is Piers.
I don't have a solution. What I started this section of the conversation by saying that how you handle trans athletes is a frontier in sports that does not yet have a full solution. And I made up an example, like maybe you could divide people by hormones. I don't know if that would work physiologically, but at the end of the day, we watch sporting events because they are competitively interesting. And so something's going to have to get resolved there, and I don't have that solution.
I do.
I do. I just tossed up hormones.
You have a trans category, or you have the trans women compete against biological men, which is what they are. And I completely respect trans rights.
That may be, that may be how it settles, but I don't know. But I'm telling you, it's a frontier without a current solution that everybody agrees to. That's all I'm telling you. And I started this by affirming, yes, men are faster and stronger than the average man is stronger and faster. Dude, world-class men are faster and stronger than world-class women. Obviously, there's huge overlap when you come down the rest of the distribution.
The truth is, if you had a gender-neutral Olympics, how many women, biological female women, would win gold medals if it was open to men and women? The answer is literally like they might win one or two.
I'm trying to stay above. You're creating this world that makes great clickbait.
No, I'm not. Honestly, I'm not.
People to see comment on.
No. I honestly,
yes,
I'm throwing back at you the thing you throw back at other people, which is science. I'm telling you that it's the scientific reality, unless you say otherwise, and I don't think you do, because you've already explained that men have a superior speed and power.
I'm not saying otherwise. I started this.
The science is clear.
I started this by saying it.
But the science is clear, isn't it?
And I'm saying the solution isn't clear, even if the science is. And so that's all. We can debate what could work.
And this is the line that separates a thinker from a showman. Near the end, Neil just says it plainly. He does not have a solution. He says how you handle trans athletes is a frontier in sports that does not yet have a full solution. Now I know some people hear that and think he dodged. I hear the opposite. Admitting that a hard question is genuinely hard is the most honest thing anyone said all night. The people I never trust are the ones who have a clean, simple answer to a messy human problem and treat anyone who disagrees like an idiot. What really lands for me is that Neil holds two things true at the same time. He says straight up that he completely respects trans rights, and he refuses to pretend the competitive questions are already solved. That is not a contradiction. That is what maturity sounds like. You can care about a group of people and still admit the logistics are complicated. Most of the internet cannot hold those two ideas in one hand. Neil does it without breaking a sweat, and then he calls the whole framing out. He tells Piers he is creating a world that makes great clickbait. That is the mask-off moment, except it is Piers wearing the mask, not Neil. Think about what reaction this debate was engineered to produce. Outrage, shares, a villain, and a hero. Neil refuses to hand that over. He keeps pulling it back to the real science and the real unsolved problem. His closing thought is the one I want people to sit with. He says the solution is not clear even if the science is. Read that twice. The science can be settled while the right thing to do with it is still wide open. That gap between what is true and what is fair is where every serious policy conversation actually lives. Piers wanted the science to automatically hand him the policy. It never does. And the fact that a scientist had to explain that to a broadcaster, calmly, on live television, tells you exactly who came prepared. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.